Hey guys, Tammy here, and today we're going to talk about, do you have enough documentation in your child custody case? Now, documentation is something that I talk about a lot, and a lot of times people are documenting, but they're not being consistent enough, or they're not documenting the right things. But sometimes it can go the opposite extreme, and they're over documenting, if that's possible. And that's what we're going to dig into today. Let me just remind you, if you like these videos, please hit like on this video and also subscribe to the channel so that you're notified as new videos are released. So, how much documentation is enough? Well, one of the things that happens is that you need to make sure that your documentation is detailed enough. I think sometimes people have a volume of documentation, but it's not really specific. They don't have dates, they don't have times, they don't have the exact, information. And what I tell people to do is keep a log in one place that you're able to go down and skim. So whether that's, in Excel electronically, some sort of Google sheet, whether that's on an app on your phone, whether it's a good old 99-cent notebook from the dollar store, whatever it is for you, just one central place where you can list everything and kind of have the ability to scan. And the reason that I like the ability to look down the whole list in its entirety is because sometimes you start to see patterns that maybe you didn't even realize were there. Sometimes things can come up once every 3 months or once every 6 months or, whatever. And you see certain patterns or certain things that happen with certain seasons or around certain breaks and those types of things. And so it is real helpful to sometimes be able to identify those patterns. Now, one of the things about documentation is you never know what is the piece that's going to be useful, because when you're actually doing it, it may never see the light of the day. That particular piece of documentation may never see the light of day. When you're doing it, you don't really know which pieces are going to be important and which pieces aren't. And so you do want to make sure that you're getting all the relevant date, time, type of details and things and enough information to jog your memory around what happened. But sometimes I see people go the opposite extreme. And I think this is something that does tend to get people in trouble in court. Sometimes people will do things like, I had a client recently where they were reporting all of the visitation tardies of the other parent and doing a police report every time. So every time the other parent was late, whether it was 10 minutes, 30 minutes, I think there was a couple times where it was, well over 30 minutes or an hour or two or whatever. Those occasions were pretty far between and not real common. But either way, this parent decided to contact the police and do a police report every time in an effort to document, in an effort to feel like they had third-party proof of what was occurring. Here's the problem with this type of thing. And there's kind of 3 different aspects to it. Number 1, I will tell you that being late for a visitation is not really going to be a number 1 priority for the court, right? It's an inconvenience. It's kind of inconsiderate of your co-parent's time. And if you're dealing with a high conflict person that's doing that to you, that's probably part of their agenda, right? Is to frustrate you and to interfere with your custodial time. And so there is some of that. And I think that's, again, why this person kind of felt the need to document it at this level. We're also using resources of, the police and all those kinds of things. And so I think what happens when you're doing things at that level, the court starts to feel like this is about the other parent. Because while tardiness is something that does impact the kids, obviously they're late for the transition or whatever, it impacts you, especially if you have a job or you have things that you have to get to. But it also is kind of low on the list of priorities for the court, right? It's not, the children aren't in danger. There isn't some immediate physical or emotional harm to the kids. And so this issue tends to be a lower level issue. So I'm not saying don't document it as far as keeping record of it, keeping it in a log, keeping track of it, but going to the extreme level of doing a police report or something like that for, something that happens maybe once a month or, once every 6 weeks, or, maybe if it's happened half a dozen times over the last year, I don't think that's generally going to be enough to really get the court to take notice. And even if it is, it will be part of a bigger picture, right? It won't be just that issue. It will be that issue coupled with many other issues. And part of what people often don't realize is you documenting it in your log or in your records is proof of it. It's just as much proof as a police officer writing it down, because a police officer is only as good as what you're telling them, right? This person is 15 minutes late, 20 minutes late. So ultimately that information is coming from you in the first instance anyway. It's a lot more efficient for everybody if you just write that down in your log and document it. Then if you need to give testimony about it, you can. If you need to write that in a declaration and include that information, you have all the dates, all the times, the court finds that very credible when you have all those dates and times written down. But we don't necessarily want to involve third-party resources. The other place I see this start to happen is people will start having all these child welfare reports, whether it's, CPS or, there's a lot of different names it goes by in different states, but essentially, Health and Human Services, child welfare, child services, whatever it's called in your state, department. And so they'll call in various CPS reports over all these different things that there's really kind of not necessarily any cold hard proof of. It's more stuff that they're suspicious is happening, or they think is happening, or that they're afraid is happening. And, when you have multiple of those, if you think something's happening and you report it and then they close the case and nothing comes from it and they say it was unfounded or it was whatever, then you continuing to do that without any subsequent events or any subsequent proof or any subsequent indication of problem, if you just keep reporting the same thing over and over under the same circumstances, hoping for a different result, you're probably not going to get it. You're going to get the same result every time. And when that type of thing starts to recur over and over and over, where one parent is reporting things over and over and nothing ever comes of those reports, and we have a lot of them, what the court starts to see is, oh my goodness, this is about the other parent. This is about getting back at the other parent. This isn't really about the children. And when the court starts to perceive you as trying to attack the other parent versus trying to protect your child, you are on a slippery slope at that point, because that's the point at which you start to lose all your credibility. And even if you do think something is happening or you suspect it, again, a lot of times we have to just, like I talked about a couple of videos ago, you got to have some patience and you got to kind of let that come together on its own without your interference. And by you interfering more, you almost stop it. Because if the person something is going on and yet you report it, they probably stop for a little bit, right? And then eventually they'll gain if nothing comes of it, they'll gain their courage back up and the behavior will start again, whether it's, emotional abuse or physical abuse or whatever we're talking about, it'll start again. And then, you kind of have like little circumstantial, suspicions around it. You report it, they stop, it goes unfounded. Now we're in that space again where maybe it stops for a little while, then they restart. I mean, I have seen this over and over and over again. And, let's face it, if you think your kids are being physically abused, I think you need to, maybe take them to the physician, take them to someone who can, to their pediatrician or somebody of that nature, or a therapist, somebody who's that mandated third-party reporter who can decide, does this reach the level of needing to be reported to child welfare? Because if it does, and that person reports it because they're a mandated reporter, then number one, it's not coming from you, right? So the court knows that this isn't you doing this. And also it gives it more credibility because it is coming from that mandated reporter. And then it comes from somebody who doesn't have emotions in it. Because again, I think our emotions work against us a lot of times and cause us to pull the trigger on things before we really should a lot of times. You know, and I mean, let me just say, you know, I know a lot of people are in domestic violence situations and all that kind of thing. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. If you're in that kind of situation, you know, you need to, you need to consult with an attorney locally in your area and kind of figure that part out. But what I'm talking about is just where people are trying to like catch parents in certain little things that really aren't important enough things for the court to really take notice of. And then what happens is that parent starts to become the problem parent, even though their goal in the first instance might have been to protect their child. But in doing that, they've given the court the impression that it's about the other parent for them. And again, that usually does not end well for you. So you have to be really careful, because then your child could end up being with that person more time instead of less, you know, because they feel like you're the person that's creating the conflict that's affecting the child negatively. I've seen that happen. So if you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, please go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. You can book a free strategy session there. I'd love to talk to you and find out how I might be able to help you more. See you guys soon.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.